Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be a bit of a Gothic romance smackdown with Rebecca and Jane Eyre. So I have Rebecca here, and I have my vintage copy of Jane Eyre. So let's talk about this, and I apologize again for the messy office. For the foreseeable future, this is my homeschool room and general mess that is my life. So I did a quick overview of Rebecca, but now I'm going to be getting into my thoughts and contrasting this to this because I feel like one works and one doesn't for very obvious reasons. And I mean, they both work on their own level, but why I prefer one over the other, very obviously. And I will say they are both very well written classics. I would recommend them to anyone. I would say they're worth reading, and it's just because of the writing alone. Also just the atmosphere, if you're looking for something Gothic, something spooky, like a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of a thrill. I mean, this is mild. I do not read horror. I don't read anything that's creepy. So this is definitely worth it. Also Jane Eyre, definitely worth it. And I like both of the authors' writing. I think that they're very, very good writers. So, okay, so now we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about our similarities, because I definitely would assume that Daphne Du Maurier was inspired by Charlotte Brontë when she wrote Rebecca, just for the fact that these books are so similar. So you have the jaded, older main character, female or male main character. And definitely like an anti-hero. This is not like your typical, nice guy, knight in shining armor. This is like your messed up, world-weary, guy who's been through a lot, seen a lot, and he's not really the better for it. So you have Max de Winter and Mr. Rochester, so Rebecca and Jane Eyre. And I guess I'll just put Rebecca here, Jane Eyre here when I put up my stuff. So you'll have Max de Winter, Mr. Rochester. They are very, very similar, except for a few things that I think make it a lot easier to accept the love, like the relationship. I definitely, in my contrast of these two, I'm going to prefer Mr. Rochester just because he's a lot nicer to Jane. He's not a good person. He is straight up tells her that. Like, he tells her, I've led a terrible life. I am not a good person. I'm not a moral person. Whereas Max is basically tells the main character, who it doesn't have a name, he tells her nothing. So you don't get this whole sense of like him having this really deep love for her. He tells her he loves her, which I found to be ridiculous at points because I just was like, their relationship didn't make sense for her to be so into him. Whereas I understand Jane. This is her first romance, same with the other girl, but it's like Mr. Rochester at least sells us this whole thing. He does all these things to make her jealous. He is really trying to win her. He's really trying to prove like, you should be with me even though I'm trash. And I admire that. I'm just gonna say Mr. Rochester all the way on this one. Okay, then you have the main characters, No Name and Jane. So for my purposes, I'm just gonna say the main character. But she is, in Rebecca, we have shy, timid, quiet. She is young, and she is recently out of school. We know this. Same with Jane. Young, recently out of school, very reserved. So I will not say Jane is shy or timid because she's not. There's always a line with her, and if you cross it, it's done. We don't cross that line. So that's why I prefer Jane. I feel like she is much better as far as a heroine, someone I can get behind, because Jane never she's gonna take a lot, but like there is always a bridge too far, and like there's lines she's just not gonna cross. So I really love that about her. I feel like she's a much stronger character, and obviously like this girl has no name. We don't know anything about her as far as, what her like dreams and desires are before. She's basically just gets married, and then it's like, I will do anything for Max. Okay. So then we have the housekeeper. So you have Mrs. Danvers over here, the very creepy and sinister housekeeper of Manderley, which is also, we have the estate. And then over here you have Mrs. Fairfax, who is the nice, kindly housekeeper of Thornfield. So these are also very similar as far as like, okay, there's like this woman who's very important and she's the head of the household. And obviously there's the contrasting character of Mrs. Danvers being, you know, kind of evil. And then obviously Mrs. Fairfax is very like sweet and kind, but you know, main character being, you know, like the housekeeper. And so the other thing that we're gonna have is the former wife. So if you know anything about those stories, this is going to be pretty much spoilers throughout, but Rebecca is the wife that is dead in the story, and the wife is not dead here, but for all intents and purposes, as far as Jane knows, might as well be dead. So you have the wife, the first wife of our main male character. And these two are very similar, basically very evil. One of them is insane, but also I would pretty much say that Rebecca comes off as being insane. She's described as being not normal. She has relationships with a lot of different people, one of those people being her cousin, and I mean like intimate relationships. The same thing is described as Mr. Rochester's first wife. She's described as being like, it all started off with her being like, you know, oh, she's like kind of off, and then, you know, she's a mess. So you have the two like wife characters, and these two are obviously going to be huge to the story, and their impact is going to affect everything and everybody in the story. So I feel like that's another thing that these characters, whether it's Rebecca or her name's Bertha Mason, they are so much of a like, you know, larger than life character, so important to the story because they affect everything. Even though Rebecca's dead, she affects everything. So, and obviously Bertha's alive and just hanging out upstairs, and so she is able to cause problems that affect everybody in the story. Also at the end, towards the end of Jane Eyre, and then at the end of Rebecca, we're going to have the burning down of the estates. So both of them will have a fire and it will burn down. It's just a lot of things that you could compare and contrast with these stories that are so similar. You have the class distinctions, you have the, you know, the very like sinister atmosphere, the slow reveal of all of these like, oh, why was it, you know, why was this happening? You know, the secrecy of the husband character or, you know, the love interest. So I feel like these are very, very similar, but I do prefer Jane Eyre. I'm always going to kind of go for the character that's a bit stronger, a bit more able to take care of herself. And I feel like the difference that made them like, the main thing that like not ruined, but made me dislike Rebecca was the reveal of the husband's like big secret. So the big secret, obviously, in Rebecca, these are all spoilers, is going to be that Max killed Rebecca. Max gunned her down, like shot her in the heart in cold blood. Like you can say he was pushed to it because she was mocking him, saying a lot of things he didn't like, and she had been cheating on him for years. She was a wreck. But we do have to like just acknowledge that he shoots her in the heart and kills her, and then basically dumps her body and puts her body in her boat, and then sinks the boat in their like harbor or whatever. So that's Max's big reveal. And the main character's response is, oh, he didn't love Rebecca. He loves me. And like just glosses right over that murder stuff. Just like, ooh, I didn't even hear that. You murdered her? What? What murder? So this is what we get from the main character. Like no response. She is ride or die. I will say that. Like she is like, I don't care that you murdered your first wife. Who do I need to lie to? Who, like, I know they found her body now. Like we can lie, we can tell them this. I will back you up. Like I will help you get rid of evidence. I am here for you. And I was just like, no, honey, get some therapy. So then you have Jane with the big reveal as they're at the church ready to get married. The big reveal that Mr. Rochester's first wife is alive, living in the house that she lives in. She's just locked in an attic upstairs, and she's like, you know, no, I'm not cool with that. And you can be my mistress. I love you. I will always love you. And she believes that he loves her. she has never doubted that he completely loves her and is devoted to her, but she says like, no, this is too much for me. I would never lower myself to be your mistress. I'm better than that, and leaves. Peace out, Mr. Rochester. Like, and she loves him. So this is like, she's sacrificing her love, but she's like, I'm not gonna be your mistress. As if. And that's where that works for me. I like Jane. I think that she's a great character. And also I just appreciate the fact that she would not do anything for Mr. Rochester. She's not going to just settle. She wants to be married. She wants to be the wife. She's not going to be the mistress. I mean, that is just like not in her character. Thank you. So yeah, there's that. The other thing is that Jane often is confronted and she's treated very poorly, but she fights back. In the very beginning, we see her, having this confrontation with her aunt, I believe, that she lives with. And you see that she is willing to like go off on people, and she has this very hot temper. And the main character here does not. So the other thing that was like a huge sticking point for me with Rebecca was at one point, the main character and Rebecca is standing by an open window talking to Mrs. Danvers. Mrs. Danvers was Rebecca's servant, loved Rebecca, hates the new woman because she's taking over and taking Rebecca's place as the mistress of the house. And Mrs. Danvers is literally telling her to jump out of the window and kill herself. She's not subtle. She's not saying it like, oh, are you sure that you want to live here? Are you sure you're happy? Like, there's no subtlety here. She's literally saying you should jump out of the window and kill yourself. You have nothing to live for. And Mr. De Winter doesn't love you. Just kill yourself. It won't hurt. I mean, you'll just fall on those rocks down there and you'll be dead. And won't that be easier? And the main character almost does it for one, because she's that weak. We're led to believe she is that like easily influenced. But then also, this is not addressed later. She's not like, hey, you know that when you told me to kill myself? Like, we should probably talk about that. Or she doesn't even tell her husband, hey, I was up there by the window and our housekeeper was telling me to jump out of the window. I guess I should have said unalive myself. Anyway, it's not gonna be monetized anyway. So yeah, that's insane. Whereas Jane is like, people constantly try and get Jane to do things. Mr. Rochester is trying to push her to be his mistress. Later, the guy that she stays with, him and his sisters, tries to push her to become a missionary and like leave with him, marry him, and be a missionary alongside him. And she is like, no, there's no way. I would never compromise myself. I'm only going to marry somebody I love. I don't compromise my values. And I feel like the thing is that there's no way Jane would be sitting there being like, oh, you told me to kill myself. Like, I'm just going to let that go. No, that is not okay. It was so frustrating because I just wanted her to like turn around and just like smack the heck out of Mrs. Danvers. Like, what are you doing? But she doesn't. She doesn't address it at all. So yeah, I prefer Jane in this instance again. I just think that she's a stronger character. She's a much more sympathetic character. And I appreciate that she doesn't just constantly need to be looked after, taken care of. She's trying to make her own way, and she's trying to be strong and independent as best she can in that society. Also, like I said, this book is set in like the 1800s. This book is set in like the 1930s. So you have like this weird class distinction that would have been through both time periods, but it makes much more sense in Jane's case that she would be feeling very subservient, that she would feel very like she needed to be more reserved and meek and kind of hold back because she is a servant. And back then she would have had basically no business talking even to her employer or talking back to them or confronting them. And she does. And I think that's what makes her, the more likable character. Whereas in Rebecca, she's the wife. She is like the mistress of this household. And she's the one always like, oh no, I don't want to say anything. Oh, and it's like, she has the power because she's up here. Servants are way down here. So I don't know why the author didn't give her anything. Like, I was like, just give her something, give her some comebacks, give her something to say for herself. But she doesn't even get a name, so it's too much to ask. I think the interactions with the couples, I prefer Jane and Edward versus Max De Winter and his new wife. I just think that Jane and Mr. Rochester have a much better chemistry. Jane definitely doesn't let him talk down to her or treat her poorly. And she always comes off like she has the moral superiority over him because she knows his past, knows his life, knows how he was living. And she doesn't really let him forget that. She kind of is like, yeah, like, you were trashy and like, I'm a good person. And I think that it can come off as like her looking down on the people around her, which I think she does a bit. And that's part of her like naive, you know, more reserved and doesn't like fully understand the workings of the world like mentality, which is why her character works. But she definitely kind of like is like, yeah, like, you may be in a higher class than me, you may be, you know, have the money, you may have the power, but like, we both know who's the better person here. And I like that about her. Whereas Max and his new wife have very little chemistry. She often says he treats her like a dog. She compares his relationship with her to her relationship with their little Cocker Spaniel. And I'm just not feeling it. It doesn't work for me, and I just didn't like it. I didn't think that it worked as well, because if you could show him as being this charismatic, this man who could just, you know, anyone would fall in love with him. He's just like, Mr. Rochester is a mess, but he's charming. Especially with people of his own class, he comes off like this wonderful catch. And you don't see that with Max as much. And I feel like the side characters kind of, because this girl doesn't even have a name, the side characters end up overshadowing her, even to an extent where I was like, oh wow, I like that side character. So like the sister Beatrice, and you know, even like, what was the other guy? The like secretary. So yeah, this book just didn't work for me as much. I think Rebecca is just a bit, yeah, it's a bit off as far as like what would work for me in a storyline of like this, with the, you know, older man, younger woman, the mystery, you know, her being so like terrified of ever saying anything and rocking the boat. I just don't like that. I prefer Jane. I prefer like her being more in your face, more, you know, hey, this is how things are. And I like that she doesn't ever just take what people are willing to give her. She's like, no, I'm going to just make my own way. And I feel like she has a much more self-confidence, and she's a much stronger character. But I like both books, and I would recommend either. I think they're good classics, and I think it's just worthwhile to point out the differences in the style and with these being so similar and so like, you know, having such similar elements, similar characters. I feel like it's worthwhile to point out like why I think one works better than the other. But that's just my opinion, and you have to let me know if you've read Rebecca or Jane Eyre, what you prefer, what you like. If you read anything spooky or Gothic for this season, let me know. I'll talk to you in the comments, and I will hopefully be making videos more often, and I'm hoping to keep up posting twice a week. We'll see. I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.